Hello, I'm Rebecca Gould of Goldie and Stitchery, and this is a second video in a series of videos on using your treadle sewing machine to do thread painting or embroidery, whichever one you want to call it. So this video is concerning how to get your hoop ready for sewing. And I do have one that is already set up to show you. And this one I had done where the hoop was prepared on the inside. And then you screw this tight to hold your thread. But I actually do not prefer it this way. The positive thing about it is you have a solid circle that has been reinforced with material. But the reason why I don't like that is you can see the threads dangling down in. You're going to have some threads that'll come through like that. And you can trim most of them away and it's not that big of a problem, but I find it a source of irritation. It's not really that big of a deal. So it's okay if you want to do the center hoop as the one. But I find that I prefer the outer hoop to be done. And I've got an example of that. Like with this one. That way all the loose threads are on the outside and just the wooden one is on the inside. So that's what we're going to do today. One thing to consider is what size hoop is the largest that you can use. And I don't have a definite answer to that because the harp space in your sewing machine, that from the back side of it to where the needle is, and then you have the bed of the machine and it curves around. That's your harp space. And you don't want your hoop to go any further in to where it will hit without the needle being able to reach the center. If you have your hoop too big, your needle is not going to be able to reach the center. And so then all of the center of your sewing area will not be able to be sewn unless you go to a smaller hoop. So you might as well just start out with a hoop that the needle can reach over a little bit past the center. And then that way you know that you will always be able to reach the center of your hoop. And I'll give you an example of that and what I mean. As you can see, this hoop is about as big as you can go and still reaching the center of your project. But you will have to turn your hoop in order to reach the other side, which is fine. However, if you have a smaller hoop, you can reach any portion of your embroidery work. But I definitely don't want to go any bigger than this for a hoop. So whichever you decide whether you want to do the inside or the outer side of the hoop, what I like to do is I like to just use muslin fabric, and I cut this about, in a half an inch. If you do it too wide, it's not going to go around the hoop very well. And if you do it too little, it may not cover the wood nicely and stay in place. So what I like to do, find an end here. So what I like to do is get piece of the material, the end, I run it up close to where the metal piece is. And then I'm going to fold it at a direct angle. It's like that. And I'm just going to grab it all up and I'm going to, it's kind of long and difficult to deal with in the beginning. Holding that material down along the hoop, holding that place, I'm going to get it as tight as I can get it. Laying that smooth, making sure it stays smooth, and staying down this. This is going to fold over the edge. But first I'm going to just, at this point, I'm going to wrap it a couple times in the same spot. Smooth it out. So then it looks like this now. I've got that folded over, and I've got this wrapped tight on this spot. And now I'm going to secure this by sewing on the outside edge. I'm not going to sew on the inside because that might wear down with time. So I'm going to take thread and a needle, and I'm going to secure this down. So just right in front here. Push through and secure that. And go over this quite a bit because I don't want this to come out at all. Doesn't necessarily have to look pretty and neat. I just want to secure it to the bit that I wrapped underneath to hold it. And I'm going to go down the length of that. And then back up a little bit. Some rather crude stitching, but it'll work. Now I'm going to just leave that to dangle because I will come back at it. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to do it at more of an angle so that it wraps around. Start angling it. Making sure I tuck that in. And I'm going over it. You know, like just a little bit further down. I don't know if how well you can see that. Let me see how I'm going over the edge. I'm not going all the way down. So it's overlapping. Overlapping at an angle. Now I can take my thread and I can stitch over that where it's overlapping for a little bit too, just to make sure that I have secured it really well and that the overlapping part is going to stay in place. Now I only do this for another 1/2 inch down. I don't do it for the whole thing, but I'm just really trying to make sure that it's secured and going to stay. I'm going to knot it and then trim it. Okay, now I'm going to continue to wind this all the way around to the other side. Holding it really firmly, making sure that tail end is tucked in there. But I will wind all the way to the other side to about here. And then I'm going to cut enough that I can tuck it under just like we did here and then secure it by winding. Okay, I'm far enough along in this hoop that I can see that this strip is not going to last all the way around. So I'm going to show you, just in case the same thing happens to you, what you can do. So now I'm going to take this loop and on the outside of the frame, I'm going to lay it down just like that. You see? And start wrapping it. And I'm going to go down, you know, a good ways with this. With it in the center, so I'm securing that in there. Keeping this on the top, my new one. And now that I've got a couple of inches underneath here of the new ribbon, I'm going to take my old ribbon and I'm going to go ahead and cut that. Going to wind it around. Last little bit I'm going to fold in half, tucking the end underneath like that. And I'm going to wrap it around, tuck it again so that this is on the outside where I'm tucking it. I'm going to hold it down tight so you can see that I've got this edge folded right near the edge of it, and this is the new strip. And I'm going to secure this real tight, trying to allow you to see and me to see. I'm just, doing a whip stitch and securing that really tight. Once again, it doesn't have to be pretty. We just want to make sure it's secure. And now we're going to knot it. Just like we did with the other way, in the beginning. And I can trim this thread later. And now I'm going to continue curving around with my new one, overlapping until I get close to the end. Okay, now I'm getting close to the end, so I'm going to leave this about, about maybe this long so that I have enough. Trim the rest off. Okay, so I'm down towards the end, and I'm really going to watch this a little bit closer. And I've unscrewed this to make it easier to deal with. And keep winding here. So I want to get it a little bit closer to the end. Okay, so you can see that I've got the edge folded under. And I have my needle. And I am just pulling this up, making a knot, and doing a little whip stitch to secure it. Oops, looks like I got it wrapped around there. There we go. It doesn't matter if it's pretty or not, and you're going to come back and trim the threads later. So I'm pulling that really tight. Now, this is not the most exciting thing to do, but once you've got your hoop made, you can use it many, many, many times before you have to redo it. I mean, maybe even years. Okay, making the knot, and there we go. That wasn't so bad. And so now this will fit in here a little bit snugger. You put this back in here. Now it fits in there pretty snug, good and snug. So then I will do up a bunch of little hoops, like if I have a project that I'm doing multiples of, and I want to, save time on rethreading, and like I'll do all the eyes on a doll face and all the lips, and then these are not expensive. So I actually have a whole bunch of small ones for when I do doll faces. Now that you have the fabric around your hoop, we need to get the fabric in the hoop. And just for practicing, I like to use muslin, cotton muslin, because one, it's inexpensive, and then I don't feel bad about messing up on it. So you're going to take your fabric and put that down, put this hoop on it, on top, push it in. Ooh, and it is tight. Okay, now that it's in, I'm gonna pull up on the edges like this. I'm gonna hold this down and pull up on the edge. And I'm gonna go around like that, pushing in the hoop, pulling up the fabric and pushing down the hoop. I'm gonna go all the way around. Then the next step is tightening this, and I will even use a pair of pliers to tighten it with. Get it as really snug as I can. I'll go back again and tighten some more until I get it as tight as a drum. Now I have this screwed down tight. I've pulled my fabric tight and it's as tight as a drum. Now since I'm just practicing, I could just use a regular pencil and draw on it and for my practice piece, but in using a pencil, it will sometimes put a grayish hue to the thread. So when I'm actually working on something I want to keep, I don't do that. And your first one that you do, even though it's not going to look very nice, I'd like for you to write on it and date it that it's your first piece, and you're going to save it. And later on, you're going to come back and see how far you've come. And just periodically, every once in a while, take one and date it and keep it, even if it's not perfect, because it takes a long time to really get this skill down. This is a bit like patting your head and rubbing your tummy. You know how we did that when we were kids? And first thing that happened is you were beating on your stomach and messing up your hair. It took you a while to get the rhythm of it. Well, it's going to be the same way. So I do have one that I've marked for my doll faces that I've done before. And you can, it's got that pound to it. And you may have noticed that I did not use any interfacing. You don't really have to use interfacing, and whether you decide to use it or not really depends on your end project. Now with my doll face, I do have some interfacing on it, some iron-on interfacing. And the reason why is when I make this doll, I want it to be very smooth and a little bit stiffer. So I need that for the end project. I also do that when I embroider pockets for aprons. I will go ahead and put the interfacing in. But there are some that I don't put interfacing in at all, just depending on what you want to make with it. If you're making a hanky or something like that, you don't want any interfacing. You want the fabric to be soft and flowy. But the way that you can get that taut and easy to sew without it bunching up is by how tight that you have got this in the hoop. And as you sew, you may need to retighten it. Those fibers may loosen up a little bit, and that's okay. You can just do that. And I'll show you my favorite way to mark it. I like to use the water erasable. I like to use these water erasable pens. I don't know if that's showing very well. And then I also like the Fons and Porter chalk pencils. Sometimes I will use these permanent pens, but you do have to be careful. Sometimes they might bleed, so you want to test it. Things that you might want to write on your hoop for practicing would be, let's see, we would want to do some dots. So I will just draw on here a bunch of circles, and we will practice satin stitches there. We might want to practice some lines. So draw a couple straight lines. We'll draw it more into the center there. And then we'll draw some curvy lines. And then we might want to just draw a bigger circle and practice some fills. Now you're all set to go to your sewing machine. And when you go to your sewing machine, the first thing you need to do is remove that foot. Good night. God bless. And don't forget to pray.